my great pleasure today to introduce you to Jeff Hobbs. So I read Jeff's book when it first came out over a year ago at this point. I think, what month did it come out?
September?
September of 2014. And I knew I wanted this book for you guys for summer reading, and then when I heard that he lived in Los Angeles, I knew even more. I was so moved by the book, and I expect that you guys were too, and that you had some pretty amazing discussions in your classroom or with your parents. How many of, as you were reading the book, how many of you really wanted to talk to someone about it, and you were frustrated that you couldn't get into the book and help out Rob? Or I had that experience. Anyway, what I'd like to do today is the following. We're going to start off with a quick reading from Jeff, so that you can kind of get back into the book. And I will begin an interview with a series of short questions, and then I want to really open it up to all of you and have you have an opportunity to ask questions of Jeff. At the end of our time together, we're going to move things around, and everyone in here who has a copy of the book will have an opportunity to have your book signed, meet Jeff, say hello, and ask any individual questions. But we'll kind of have to move through that quickly. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming to my favorite high school in the country. So can you start off with a quick reading for the kids?
Very quick reading, just because you asked me to.
I did ask you to, it's true.
But yeah, this is college graduation. 20, maybe 25 of his friends and family had come up for the day, aunts and uncles, cousins, neighbors, friends. They'd all packed themselves into a procession of 4-seat cars and caravanned up to New Haven. In their center were Frances and Jackie. Jackie sat beside her mother's wheelchair, both of her hands stacked upon Frances's on the armrest. The dean read each of our names from a small lectern to the right of the stage, while the master gave out diplomas in the center. When she said Robert Deshawn Peace, Bachelor of Science in Molecular Biophysics and Biochemistry with distinction in the major, a cacophony of whoops broke out from his cheering section in the rear of the tent. Rob took his time mounting the stage. With his left hand on Rob's shoulder, the master handed the diploma over with his right, and the two men lightly hugged one another, and the hooting behind us reached a crescendo to the point where the more reserved parents and students, meaning about 90% of those present, began turning their heads, faces calibrated to amusedly share in the joyfulness even while in their minds. Some might have been wondering why such people couldn't contain themselves a little bit more. And then Rob was at the microphone, on which the master had made his opening statements. He cleared his throat for his section to calm down. The tent grew quiet. He glanced at a scrap of paper in his hand, pocketed it, and said, "A Yale education encompasses more than classes. It is the experience that has better prepared me for life. I would like to thank all the people who supported me in this endeavor, and I dedicate this moment to my motivation and heart, my mother." I expected the audience, led by the New Jersey contingent, to break out into cinematic applause, but for a few moments everyone remained silent and still. The clapping and cheers, when they came, were brief. Someone shouted, "Peace out," and we all laughed, and then Rob returned to his seat between us.
Thank you. It's still hard. It's still hard. I'm sure you still miss him.
I do.
So, thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm so grateful to be here talking to anybody about Rob Peace, but particularly students and teachers. He was a special student and also a fine teacher.
What does it mean to you to have this opportunity to talk to kids about it? So this is the biggest group. We've worked a lot together, but this is definitely the biggest group, and certainly the biggest group of kids that we've worked with.
I mean, this was the, people sometimes ask me what was the point, what were your intentions, and I mean, this was the point when I sort of clumsily started out many years ago to learn more about the life of my friend. Was this, getting to participate in reaching students, impacting lives from some teachers I hear from in towns I've never heard of, states I've never been to, maybe even changing and even saving lives.
Yeah.
I think he would be glad about that.
So there's so many questions that I want to ask you. You didn't know this was initially going to be a book, right?
No, I thought maybe an article for the Yale Alumni magazine, or just a stack of paper. It's hard to formally publish a story this hard and this sad, but we were just trying to do, not just me, everyone who participated, which ultimately was a lot of people, just something more meaningful in the news article that took Yale drugs murder and left it there.
And it kind of exploded, right, as you were doing the interviews with people?
Yeah, I would say I intended to maybe talk to 6 or 8 friends and family, and Rob had a lot of friends. Everyone I spoke to said, you got to go talk to my cousin. He used to hang out with Rob. You got to go talk to this girl. She and Rob messed with each other once. And 8 people, 80 people, very fast.
And
Personally.
They had unique experiences with Rob, except many of them said the same thing, that Rob was...
Rob was the man. That's how a lot of the stories ended. Peace was the man. And he was. He nurtured that.
But you've also said in interviews that we've done in the past that everyone felt like Rob was his or her best friend.
Yeah, and people were very possessive of their friendship, which just in terms of threading together these stories was tricky. But as these stories came out, most of them very, very funny about his kindness and intelligence, tutoring people's friends' kids, making airport pickups, but some, obviously these harder patterns came up of recklessness, confrontation, drugs, patterns that didn't really become clear to even his closest friends till it was too late. And I think the reason that happened is because you can get so accustomed to thinking of someone as the man, someone as sort of smart and just so much himself as Rob, that you forget that he was also a man with everything that means.
But I think what I wanted to know about is, as you're doing these interviews with people from the neighborhood, people from Yale, people from the high school where you ended up working, the fact that everyone thought he was their best friend. What did he do that? What did he have? How was he able to make people feel that way?
I can speak for myself and a lot of people. He listened. He was genuinely curious about people, and if you had a story, he wanted to hear it. And everybody has a story. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, we didn't know too much about his own story.
You knew that he had a father in prison?
I did, but that's all I knew. He said it happened when he was 5, when in fact it happened, his father was arrested when he was 7, and he was very much a part of everything that happened after. And I've wondered about that lie. It seems like a very small but specific lie. And nobody knows, but I would imagine when you're 5, it sort of precedes permanent memory. So sort of a way to make people ask as little as possible about that part of his life, if that makes sense.
What can you tell us about his mom, Jackie?
Jackie, just that there are, the very first time I went to visit her, again thinking of some kind of article, I was nervous. I knew her a little bit, and I expected, this was 6 months after she lost her only son, a very hard way. And, I expected a still shattered woman, but she wasn't. She was gracious. She smiled a lot. She laughed a couple times, and was, I think, moved that people still cared. Very courageous to put herself forward in a lot of detail, not all of it flattering detail, to tell the story of her son's life, not just his death.
How did she feel about the book coming out?
It was hard. She was wonderful, but that was a very hard time. I guess about a year and a half ago. Just because there was more exposure than one had any reason to believe. Just a lot of reviews, and she could Google her son's name, and even the positive reviews, they all use the words ghetto and poverty, stuff about his father, and of course drugs, and that was a very hard moment. Over the course of the next couple months, she wasn't a big fan of mine at that point.
Did she ever stop talking to you?
No, we were always talking, but the tone of some of those talks was not pleasant, and I experienced huge guilt for causing this very special lady more pain. But what happened is she saw the book reaching high schools, and teachers were writing her letters, and she saw it. She saw the positive.
And just so you guys know, Jackie's never read the book, still, to this day. She hasn't said that she won't, right? Someday she might.
Yeah, she might. Everyone she knows, everyone in her family has read it. So she knows an awful lot about the content and the messages. But yeah, I think she might someday.
I want to just, I got some questions from kids, and if it's okay to kind of break here for a second. Kate Gannon, where are you? Kate, I know you had a question.
So I was wondering, after you published the book, if any of the Burger Boys contacted you, and if so, was it a negative or a positive interpretation?
Oh yeah, thank you for asking about them. Yeah, we're still in touch, and they, like Jackie, were very courageous in putting themselves forward for this. We spent an awful lot of time together, mostly in the same kitchen where they would hang out with Rob. A lot of laughter in that kitchen. And, I was pretty upfront with them about again, the content and the stories that are in the book. And they sort of saw beyond that. They were really, I was expecting a lot more, I guess, anxiety or even anger from them, as we discussed. But no, they've been very supportive and very happy.
And a follow-up question to that is, what happened at the funeral with the Burger Boys? What do you guys remember? They didn't, yeah, they were disinvited, not invited, and Jackie's relationship to the Burger Boys now?
They still don't speak, and I'm not sure that they ever will. I'm not sure it would be healthy to. But whenever I would go from Jackie's home to Curtis's home on Smith Street, they're about a mile apart. I would always tell her where I was going, and she would always ask about them, how they doing. You could tell the love was still there. Vice versa, they're constantly asking how she's holding up. So whenever, obviously the chaos happened, but the bonds from all those years growing up are still there.
You think they'll ever speak again?
I don't think so.
Really?
Just from still talking to Jackie fairly often.
Can you talk, I'll come back to more questions from you guys, but can you talk a little bit about the process of gathering the information for this book? We talk to our kids a lot about primary sources, and,
Sure.
Like, how did you vet these people? And just even where you had to go to get the information?
Sure. As you know, I'd never written nonfiction of any kind before, so
Jeff is a novelist primarily.
like I said, it was very clumsy, comical sometimes, uncomfortable, once or twice, maybe harrowing. For the most part, I was just connections between people. I was sort of referred, I guess, and you know, mostly just improvised, knocked on a lot of doors. Facebook is very helpful in terms of reaching out to people. Yale was probably the most guarded professors and administrators there, more so than any drug dealer in Newark, New Jersey.
Why were they
Yes,
so
it's
guarded?
fun. I could see why. I mean, there's at that stage, that this guy coming around saying he's going to write a book like this. I think the instinct on their part is going to be some sort of sensational anti-Yale diatribe, which I don't think it is, and since it's come out, they've been amazing in sort of pushing that message and using the book. But as far as fact-checking, it's hard. It's hard to fact-check people's memories. I tried to cross-reference different stories as much as I could.
Did you get the same stories from this? I mean, like, if you're speaking to two people about one incident, is it basically the same view of what happened?
Yeah, not all the time. Most of the time, the sort of fundamental event was pretty consistent across different tellings, but people's viewpoints definitely varied in predictable and unpredictable ways. And I found getting people together in groups, that's when a lot of laughter and a lot of dialogue comes out that way, and people sort of fact-check each other on the spot, sort of calling each other out on exaggerations.
Can you talk for a second about what you left out of the book? I know that you kind of, so you guys will have something a little special. You'll be able to hear what some readers didn't get a chance to see. You were respectful of Jackie's wishes, I know.
Yeah, Jackie had not a lot, but a couple details about Rob's father that she did not want in the book, concerning his, he was drafted to Vietnam, and before, he never fought in Vietnam because he was in Germany and was dishonorably discharged for beating up two white soldiers. And that's how he ended up back home in Newark before he met her. And, I wasn't sure why, but she felt very strongly about it. The sad thing is I had to leave out a lot of his various friendships and relationships with students that he taught that all were very powerful. Like we said, he had a lot of friends, and I had to leave a lot of those out just for space, really. I mean, this book could have been 1,200 pages long. And also certain, like a very close friend of his growing up worked in the prosecutor's office in Newark, so he couldn't really be in the book just because of that conflict. There were sort of, again, it was a lot of improvising and reaching out to people about what they were comfortable with. Also romances with girls, he did pretty well. With girls and all powerful relationships, but I didn't want to start anything.
And just one other, it's not really a question, but I'd love for you to tell the story about what happened when you spoke with the Yale Club in New York, right, in the city?
Oh, sure. I spoke at the Yale Club.
Just to add to this, the book, at least in my book groups, has been very polarizing. People are super critical of Rob, or they're super critical of Jackie, or a lot of people have very strong opinions about this book, and I know, this should have been my lead-in, that you experienced this firsthand in New York. So
Sure, yeah. I was speaking at the Yale Club in Midtown Manhattan they'd asked me to come, and it was a nice group. You can probably tell I was never meant to speak in public. But you know, it's very special, and I spoke for I think 45 minutes about just Rob's experience and about empathy and about Yale and the student experience there, and it was pretty emotional for me. Maybe because my 4-year-old daughter was there. I'm not sure why, but I was sort of choked up, and as soon as I finished, this older man, probably 70 or so, shot his hand up and just started yelling at me about this guy was a drug dealer, and how dare you, you know, try to justify what he did or glorify it, which, you know, is not my intention. I hope you know that. And then some younger black, you know, more recent alumni started yelling at him, and some older women were bickering about something else.
So was it a fight at the Yale Club? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I spoke at Hampton University, which is a historically black university in Virginia, about 2 weeks after the officer who killed Michael Brown they decided not to indict him. So it was a very charged moment there, and that was amazing. And then I went to the Yale Club, and everybody's trying to rip my head off.
So thank you. We'll take questions from you guys now. I know Debbie Lee had a question. Where are you?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Hobbs. So my question is, do you have any values or lessons you learned with your relationship with Rob that you saw today?
Sure.
Did everybody hear that? Lessons from Rob.
Yeah, of course, and it's actually hard to parse through that in retrospect, just because of all I've experienced telling Rob's story. To do that authentically, but certainly curiosity. Rob had a great understanding of the fact that we all don't experience each moment the same way. It's very easy to forget that in high school and in college in particular. And just a general non-judgment of anybody. And you know, Rob, I think had a lot of right to judge a lot of people at Yale, myself probably more than anybody. You know, I'm sure the first couple days at Yale, at some point I compared our dorm room to a prison cell just because it was small. I'm not proud of this. Just people were saying that. I had no idea that the guy sitting across from me, his father lived in one of those. But he didn't hold that against me. That's pretty special when you think about it. I mean, I'm sure he had certain words go through his mind.
Michelle?
Yes. Hi. I just wanted to know what motivated you to share the story with others? I know that you said that you're a novelist and that nonfiction is something really different for you. So what did you want to portray in your book?
Again, the question was, what did you want to portray in your book? Why did you want to share this story?
Sure. And that's a good question, one I didn't really sort of have an answer to when I started. And you know, along the way, it was very easy to just think that he was my friend, and we're doing this for our friend, you know, some form of justice for a friend. Obviously, that's a little bit disingenuous as the process moved along, and it did turn into a book. I mean, at heart for students in particular, at Hampton University, a young man stood up, and that's what he asked me. He was sort of angry. He said, what's the point of this? How can you stand up there and say he's not a thug when he died dealing drugs? And you know, I was uncomfortable. I've learned one of the messages is that it's okay to be uncomfortable. And I told the story of Oswaldo, obviously struggled, but now is doing very important work in the South Bronx with traumatized teenagers. He wouldn't be doing that without his friendship with Rob. By his own account, he would most likely be dead. So it was just that as I met so many people who were directly or obliquely impacted by Rob, who certainly had his flaws. It's just that it's not just our own struggles and our own burdens and our own anxieties. It can feel that way in school, I know, but it's how we impact those whose paths we cross.
Other questions? Yeah. Tell us your name.
Josh,
Hey, Josh.
I wanted, it's pretty clear that Rob's last few years was a struggle for him, struggling to become successful and make money. At which point exactly do you think started all this downfall where he just didn't know what to do anymore and didn't know how to, in the beginning, he's always making money and building up to something, and eventually it just kind of looks like
So-
exactly.
Well, in the
That's a
back,
really
the
good
question
question.
was, at what point did Rob Hayes not really, he was falling?
His
At what,
downfall,
yeah, what was the turning point for
Sure.
him? I know it's
hard.
only your opinion. and-
Yeah, I mean, obviously the one person who didn't get to contribute to the story is Rob. So it's hard to speak for him or psychoanalyze him, but I think when his father died in prison in 2006, Rob actually had been working on a motion just to get his father out that it was denied, I think 3 days before his father died. He didn't talk a lot about it with other people, but particularly at high school where he was a good teacher. Julie and I argue about this a little bit. She knows a lot more about teaching than I do.
Wow.
I mean, that's when Father Leahy, the headmaster in particular, just started to see the friction in a way that he had never seen it before. And when you think about a school like St. Benedict's, where virtually half of their job is to sort of identify that friction in young men and try to help ease it, even they didn't fully understand it. In Rob's case, I think speaks to something very powerful and troubling.
Thank you. Thanks for the good question.
Thank you.
Anybody else with a question? Let's see a hand over there. What's your name?
Lava.
Ava.
Yeah.
Thank you. Loud.
How do you think your life would have been different, or if you would have been a different person if you never got accepted into Yale?
Sure.
The college acceptance.
Got it.
Yeah.
Never affected your life.
The community of Yale, how did it
No,
affect me?
Rob, meeting Rob in general.
How did meeting
Oh, sure.
Rob
Yeah.
affect
I mean,
your life?
he and I were randomly paired. Maybe not so randomly when you sort of break down the foursome that we were in. But I think about that all the time. Even if I was just placed in the room across the hall and I shared a bathroom with Rob, but didn't, we weren't sitting in the room just sort of BSing about football. It's really hard to say. I think it would have been a much different experience, much different. But I can't specifically sort of dissect how. I probably just would have been a much preppier person. Better.
Thank you. There's a question from over here. Yeah. What's your name?
My name's Grace. I was wondering, why do you think it was so hard, because Yale's 90 and school there, why do you think it was so hard for him to not get such a great job after? So he worked at airport, not
So the question was, why was Rob not able to get such a great job after Yale? But can I add to that, was that a choice by Rob?
Yeah, I mean that's a very naughty, again, troubling part of it. I mean, he was a prime candidate for any science fellowship out there. as he was getting ready to graduate. And I remember talking to the professor in his lab who brought that up and said he brought that up to Rob about these fellowships and all these opportunities, just networking opportunities that is sort of part of the Yale diploma. Most people are very happy to take advantage of that. And Rob didn't like to ask for help. And we can talk more about that if you like. I don't know if you saw it as an expression of weakness, even the simplest kind of help, like sitting down with a friend and letting them listen. And then as he graduated and he wanted to be home, I think when you look at the big picture of a story like this, it's sort of easy to pick those moments out. But when maybe the value of a book in general is sort of experiencing on the ground this pretty special, complicated, and again flawed guy who's just living and day to day making decisions like these. Maybe put off a fellowship for a year. Decisions that probably seemed fairly innocuous at the time. And just trying to make sense of the world and sort of sustain his vision of how he wanted to inhabit it. I would call it a romantic vision. I think he saw some kind of romance in working at the airport, even flying all over the world. As all you readers know, romance is vital, maybe the most vital thing, but it doesn't always end well.
Other questions, maybe gray shirt? What's your name? Lucy.
I was just wondering, after interviewing all of Rob's friends and family and learning more about his childhood and just like who he was before Yale, did you feel that the Rob that you met at Yale and you became friends with was the same person that he was as
That's
a child?
such a great question. Great.
That's
So
a
the question is,
fantastic
was the
question.
Rob piece that Jeff met at Yale the same person as that knew all of the friends that were interviewed?
Yeah, I think so. He sort of, the way he entered high school and he didn't know how to swim, and he was this sort of quiet guy with what was termed to me as a Huxtable fro. Who, when he graduated, was
Do you guys know what a Huxtable is in here? Yes? Cosby Show?
Sorry. But he was just a quiet leader, not just classmates and not just classmates in jail, but all these people in his life and his family. He was sort of really the fulcrum in his very large extended family. His mother told me about going to his high school graduation and just seeing these faces of people she was related to, but lived in Ohio and she hadn't talked to in years. Rob was the one who kept everybody together, and that was the Rob I knew. That was a great skill of his. After college, it was a different experience for all of his friends. I spoke to Rob on the phone probably 4 times a year. Not often, but consistently we made the effort to keep in touch. Thought that life was long and there would be time for a reunion, which there wasn't. But on those conversations, we didn't share anything. That's a great regret. What's up? How's it going? Just because we're guys, it's unmanly to talk about your feelings, I guess. That was one of our great friends' takeaway when he read it, was just that we have to stay in touch more.
How about up here? In the far back, what's your name?
Ryan.
Brian?
I was wondering why, since Rob had such a deep romantic relationships, he never chose to get married.
Thank you for the question. The question is considering Rob's deep relationships with a lot of women, why he never got married. I'm not a psychologist. Relationships are complicated I was just talking to a friend of his last week in New York who sort of was talking about how frustrated he would get listening to Rob complain about women, often just very good women who treated him well. And he remembers just getting ticked at Rob for just complaining. I mean, again, it's above my pay grade to dig too deep into these issues. I think it had a lot to do with this idea he had of providing. He wanted to provide for people. He was very fixed on that. His mother, other people in his family, his friends, that was definitely a thing. He didn't want to settle down until he felt like he was in a place where he could provide, where he could be a man.
Thank you. And we probably have time for one more question. There. What's your name? I'm sorry, you can get your book signed too and ask at the end, I promise. Yeah.
We can do 2 more questions.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. We're going to get you 2. That was Jeff's.
You seem very...
Yeah,
All the things that you knew about Rob.
Wait, tell us your name first. Sorry. Guy?
So all the things you knew about Rob and like his personality and stuff, why did you decide to name the book The Short and Triumphant?
That is such a great question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And, I guess, to be upfront, it was sort of the only thing I butted heads about with my editor. It was his idea for the title. My idea was just peace, a life. You can probably tell I'm not much of a fighter, so he won. You know, I think he was right. Just the exact wording is tricky. 'Cause I wouldn't necessarily look at his life as a tragedy, but certain elements of his life were tragic. Again, not asking for help in the way he was just surrounded by people who loved him, who would want nothing in the world more than to just help him figure it out the way teachers do, and friends do. I think that the thinking was just we sort of owed it to the reader that this is a hard story, and maybe in some sense, knowing the ending, that the reader might be more prone to sort of extract the positive and sort of pay more attention to these small, powerful moments.
How many of you guys would have preferred a title that didn't give away the ending? Raise your hand. Just curious.
It's totally okay.
Yeah, you don't. It's all right. Lots of times we don't like titles, but you would have liked. You didn't want to know that Rob was going to die. It was clear. Everybody knew from the beginning that this was happening. And how many of you, as you were reading the book, still had the feeling, please make a right choice here. Yeah. Please do the right thing, and it didn't happen. It's definitely one of the things that I liked in terms of, like, it's a book you want to reach into the pages and shake Rob. Okay. What's your name? Ori.
Racism and poverty seems to be a recurring theme in the novel. While writing this novel, do you think while changing his prejudices and negative preconceptions towards other races and like poverty issues?
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, and that's a very big one to end on. I was hoping to give a short answer, but there's so many components to that. As I was doing it and even writing it, I wasn't really thinking in terms of race and class. I don't think Rob is emblematic of his race or class. I think the idea was just to think about people and experience. You know, I was very struck. I spoke to a lot of friends of his from Yale who maybe shared threads with his upbringing, whether that's money or a fractured family or just the stress of the city. successful lives and have homes and families and jobs they like, but every single one, once the topic came up through Rob, just expressed a very raw, powerful trauma of isolation when it still trails them 15 years after Yale. And these were my friends too, and I had no idea they were experiencing that. They did not want me to have any idea because I look the way I look. I come from where I come from. And if I did, it would maybe signify that they didn't belong. Of course they belong. And of course everybody wants to belong. So I think, again, as sort of a white, overeducated man participating in a publishing apparatus where most stories in this country are told by white, overeducated men, I just wanted to, make the story about people, relationships. We all love our mothers, our friends. We all experience triumphs and disappointments. We're all trying to get through the day.